Mickey. I've done this. I've done this chat once, just about exactly a year ago. It's really interesting how things have changed for everyone in the music world and for cellists in general. In particular, um, within that year, I think that was March of 2020. Now we're in April of 2021, and so um, for me personally, how musically things have changed is pretty dramatic. I think in March, like a lot of us, I was trying to go back to the source and um, regroup myself and relearn some things technically. Use this time of being alone with the instrument to go back to etudes. I've done all sort of online things, going on Instagram and going through the cello suites day by day and commissioning little pieces. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. And my orchestra, I'm very lucky the BSO has been doing programs that we have available online. So since October already, we have almost a program every week. So in a way, there's a non-normal normal. We have a lot of repertoire that we're doing all the time. So it keeps me busy after all that 6-7 months of really being alone and trying to figure things out. So now we're playing regularly orchestra programs, and I'm still doing recitals and that kind of stuff virtually, and teaching. I have my orchestral repertoire class at NEC, commonly referred to as excerpt class, and that's always been a great thing to have. And it's a way to work with students, and the students at NEC are so fantastic, and there are no teachers who are really interested in orchestra music. So okay, I have a question. Could I talk about my cello minute challenge? All right, so what I think many of us last spring were stuck in trying to find things to do. I was certainly there. I'm the kind of person who needs something to work to. I have a very hard time just practicing. So I had this idea of asking anyone who wants to write a piece that I could perform in under 1 minute. So the idea was to put it on Instagram as a post where the maximum length is a minute, and I just threw that out there to see what comes up, and I had some really good responses. So this stuff is on Instagram. A bunch of them I recorded for last summer's Tanglewood virtual online Tanglewood. So that was really nice, and yeah, I got very diverse group of pieces, which was really fun. There was a friend of mine who's a fiddler, and so there was one that was kind of I had to channel, do the chopping and stuff like that, and do kind of Celtic fiddling. Some very high-profile composers like Nico Muhly and Marty Epstein that I'm friends with. Other people I didn't even know were composers. So that was a really gratifying project, and I don't know, maybe we'll get back to it at some point and try to ask for more. So there's a kind of a follow-up. Could you please outline the process of preparation, practicing the contemporary music selection in an audition? How important is contemporary music in one's total audition process? That's from Aiden. I'm curious what kind of audition you're talking about, because orchestra auditions very rarely have contemporary music, and schools don't very. I know Juilliard requests a piece after. It used to be at least after 1945. I wonder if they pushed the date a little further, because 1945 now is a really long time ago. So process of practicing contemporary music piece I can say in general, because I'm not sure where it fits into an audition. I like to spend as much time. I mean, there's two processes simultaneously. One is on the cello. Very often you just need to figure out what goes where, getting fingerings in. And the other part is reading it and trying to speak the music, sing the music, and try to relate it to what we know. So there's nothing more boring than a contemporary piece that sounds like you're reading a language you don't speak. So basically, what it is especially non-tonal music. It's just written in a different language, and we need to we need to learn the language, and we need to speak and convince our listeners in that. But I'm curious to know what the question is about, where auditions or contemporary music fits into, because that would be interesting. The only one I know of schools is Juilliard, but there and some in Europe. Will you happen to be related to Michael Katz? Oh, so Michael, it's funny. Okay, so just off the record, because we both grew up in Israel, and he's like a couple years younger than me. And I remember the first time when I was a kid in the Tel Aviv Conservatory, and I see the name of students, and I see him there. It's like, wait a second, that's because my name formally is Michael Michael. And then I didn't really get to know him. And then when I was at NEC, I was just finishing up studying with Larry Lesser. And then Larry tells me, you wouldn't believe I have a student coming next year, and he has your name. And that was Michael. So I got to know him as a fantastic cellist. And yeah, he's a really nice guy and fantastic cellist. But we're not related as far as I know. Who knows? You look great. Well, thank you. Could you please share a routine before studying? I would love to know what, Nico. I would love to know what you mean routine before studying. So if you can clarify, I would love that. So if you mean a warm up or preparing to learn a piece of music, or just in general. So if you can follow up and clarify, that would be great. Kevin Abram is asking about working with György Kurtág. It's funny because I have it in my bio, but I worked with him not on his music. I worked with Kurtág on Beethoven. He's obsessed with Beethoven, and I was when I was in Jerusalem and worked with him. There was a workshop which was all his music and music of Beethoven, and I worked with him on the sonata in A major. And it was a long time ago. What I remember the most is that we didn't get, the pianist was very frustrated because we didn't get past like for cello, like the first two lines, because Kurtág is just obsessed with tiny details and just the smallest ideas of what is implied by the harmony. Is a fascinating man. So I really feel fortunate I got to work with him, even though it wasn't his music. I did work on a bunch of his music later on at Marlborough. Kim Kashkashian, a violist, she brought a bunch of manuscripts, I mean photocopies of manuscripts of Science, Games and Messages, and we did a performance, a string trio performance of some of them. So some of them are cello pieces. I think by now a lot of them are printed. So any of you cellists who is interested in looking for more music, and you and by the way, and I learned how to say his first name correctly, which is not György, it's György or something. György, I think the Y you actually pronounce. Anyway, a lot of great, very interesting small pieces for cello. All right. That's interesting. Ethan, hey Ethan. Future concert programming. So Ethan is asking about if I have ideas about the future of concert orchestra concert programming. And it's interesting because that's one thing that I think the pandemic might change. One thing is especially in the US, I don't think it applies as much to other countries, but the emphasis on diversifying composers. And so all the orchestras with whatever kind of programming they were doing are really digging and trying to find a more diverse crowd of composers. And we'll see, because of the pandemic, we see a lot more shorter concerts without intermission. So that's something that we'll see. I think we'll have to see how people feel about all of those. If they if people kind of want to go back to the way things were, or if we continue somewhere else. I know a lot of orchestra managements have been pushing for more thematic themes to programs, and I think it'll be a feedback of audience and managements and players, and to see what sticks and what doesn't. I mean, every time we think we have a preconceived idea of what programming should be, you get a different feedback from the audience. So if I was to read, go by Alex Ross or critics, they would say we should just play contemporary music all the time. But then you do a program that the critics just love, and the hall is empty. So it's going to be interesting. I think there'll be some interesting changes. Okay, let's look. So Michael is asking, this is interesting. Michael is taking finishing bachelor's in cello next month and planning to take a gap year before thinking about school and master's level program. Any tips for what you should work on during this year? I think if you feel, well, career-wise and all of that, there's no way of knowing. So everything depends on your circumstances. If you're looking to gig or teach, actually you know what, that's something. If you're finished your bachelor's, that's a great time, and you have a year off, it's a great time to explore teaching, especially of kids. If you haven't done much of that, you'll find that working with kids and going back to the fundamentals of technique to teach them how to play the cello helps you rethink yourself on what we do technically and musically. So that's one thing that I think with a bachelor's degree in cello, you can easily, well, not easily, but you can find students. That's very interesting to do. And I think also it's a great time. Also, usually I would say depends where you are geographically, but now everything, there's so much more opportunity to do things online. So looking for teachers for a lesson or two, or exploring that repertoire when you're not in a school where there's specific things you need to do. You can tell yourself, okay, I really feel like I always wanted to play this and that piece, this piece, that piece, and see what you can do. So you build up just repertoire that you can carry into the future. But gap year I think is really smart move for many people between degrees, especially these days when if you're not sure where exactly you're going, it's a great time to think and see where things go, and how like where you might, sometimes life takes you in really unexpected directions. So let's see. How would you recommend to study the Popper High School etudes? I want to play them all during next year. All of them is a lot. There's 40 of them. Popper etudes are such a great gift to us. I grew up, my first teacher, Uri Vardi, was teaching at University of Wisconsin. He started me off on Popper etudes, but then from the time I was 13, I didn't have a teacher who was into that at all. And then I went back to it myself. I think with Popper etudes, you shouldn't set yourselves big goals as far as learning a certain number of them. There are some that are very similar. There are some that you can skip, and each one of them has certain technical aspects of the cello that you need to identify. So just trying to learn the music from beginning to end. I mean, it's nice. It's definitely a good thing to do, but you can get a lot more out of those Popper etudes if you identify the specific technical challenge. And being those etudes very often has to do with thumb position, because he loves thumb position. Very often has to do with bow control, especially in legato. A lot of them have legato and string crossings and different configurations of that. Some of them have specific musical ideas like the scherzando, scherzando one, or yeah, basically once you identify them, you don't even have to play an etude through every time. Sometimes those poppers are better really concentrating on a specific section of it. And yeah, so in those things, in popper, I would say quality rather than quantity. Really turn the microscope on and think, what is popper trying to get me to focus on, and especially what applies to my other repertoire, because it's always nice to pair an etude with something where the repertoire where the etude applies to it, uses the same technique, same ideas, and that's pretty easy to find. If one of you remembers, there's that guy, the German guy, Gerhard Mantel, and he has a little booklet called Practicing Etudes. I think it's out on Schott or Schirmer or something, where he goes by specific technical ideas and has some practice suggestions and etude suggestions. I think it's called Practicing Etudes or Etude Practice or something like that by Gerhard Mantel. So if you and he uses popper, he also uses Piatti, Grützmacher, a bunch of others, but it's a really useful tool. I bought that once, and sometimes I'm like, well, I don't remember which etude is really good for bow distribution or for big shifts or something, and can look into that, and then I can jump right to the etude that I'm interested in. And sometimes things I don't even remember exist, like if I look at Dotzauer and I don't remember which dots or which is which. So that's very, very useful. I recommend that thing. So related to that, yeah, from Sam Khan, what cello technique methods book do I find myself often revisiting? One thing I do is take little fragments from pieces that I'm working on and use them as exercises. That's very useful. And then you find yourself, especially when you're pressed on time, you don't feel like you have to spend a certain time on exercises and etudes and then on your pieces, but you take little bits from what you're working on, and then it's 2 for 1, right? Always go back to Fayard. I really don't have any fancy suggestions. I go with some of the classics. Fayard, I always get back to. I was saying Dotzauer all the way through, it's useful. All 4 books. Book 1 and 2 have things that are more fundamental, but sometimes even I think for very advanced cellists, going back to like stuff in Dotzauer book 2 is very useful. So you can practice things having to do, especially with bow arm and with intonation, even when you're just in neck positions. You don't have to go to book 4, which is all over the place. And popper and piattis are always there. I've tried to get myself into Grützmacher. I don't like it. Darren Kirsch is asking, can you talk a little about the Weinberg preludes a little? Oh, you should go get into them. There's some, again, I'm not sure how to pronounce Mścislav, I think. Weinberg is a Polish Soviet composer, very close to Shostakovich. It was kind of a student, and he has a book of preludes, 20, no, it's more than 20. Crap, I'm forgetting the number. It's solo pieces. I've played a few of them for a recent recital. They're very odd. The first time I heard one, there's one that's based on the main theme from Schumann Concerto, and Gideon Kramer plays them on the violin. So if you look it up, actually, there is some cello recording, but if you can look up Gideon Kramer's recording of at least some of them, it's really fascinating. And it's kind of like Shostakovich if he didn't take his meds. It's very odd. Some of them are loud and angry. I don't think they would make a great recital piece as playing the whole thing, but I had a very good experience. I picked 5 of them, and I put them in a certain order that I decided on, and they fitted very nicely in a concert. So I recommend it. Is becoming more and more well known. There's good chamber music and symphonies and a bunch of stuff. Really underrated composer who's making a comeback now. So if you go for Weinberg, you'll probably have Weinberg geeks. Like, oh my God, you're playing this. Yeah. So it's becoming really popular. Warm-ups, yeah. So Eneko is following up about preparation. Yeah, warm-up, long notes. Yeah, long notes are great. I think to start a day playing long notes, playing a little vibrato. Sometimes I like to just take out a Bach saraband to start the day. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel better than playing a scale. Scales are good too, but sometimes it's nice to take out something that's not going to tax you too much when you're not warmed up. But take a piece of music, take an excerpt. An orchestral player, so slow movement of Brahms too, or something. Take something out and explore your sound. My teacher Larry Lesser would always say before concerts to refamiliarize yourself with your tone. And I think for us cellists, we're all to some extent tone junkies, and every time you sleep, every time you're away from the cello, you lose some of that. And so playing those long notes, playing the swan, playing something really beautiful, and listening to yourself and trying to find the freedoms, the technical freedoms that you want, and especially before a concert. I mean, that's what Mr. Lesser talks about: breathing, and rather than playing the most difficult passage of the piece you're about to perform, finding your sound, finding your voice. I think that's great. And yeah, but preparation for pieces, but we'll get into that. Let's go on with some questions. Jen is asking about vibrato that tends to disappear, distracted by other technical challenges. That's a very good question. Do you give advice for keeping vibrato going? It's very hard. I don't think it depends on where you are on your cello journey. I don't think vibrato should be something that we worry about so much. So I think it's perfectly fine to have. So let's get the cello out. To play daily, if that's something that you're really working on. Simultaneously do 2 things. One is practice specifically the vibrato, and that means doing vibrato exercises. Anything from putting on a metronome, all that kind of stuff. Whatever you have from your teacher, you can do if you know that one where you slide up and down and gradually get smaller and smaller until you get to the notes you want. Just playing a slow piece or a slow theme from something and practicing note by note the vibrato and trying to find different kinds of vibrato, but then playing your repertoire and not worrying about it. I don't think it's worth worrying about it. And Baroque cellists can play beautifully without any vibrato at all. So I think once this becomes once you develop for yourself, note by note, a free vibrato that sounds good to you, that feels good to you, it will gradually creep into your playing. And then when you feel very comfortable with it, if there's a passage where you want to have a very consistent vibrato through a phrase, that's not something that's always desirable. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So I think it's more important to build strength in the fingers. So if you do your scales, if you do any of the cross manzo, all that stuff, I should do it more. Any kind of exercises for finger strength, a lot of double stops. Once you feel very stable, the vibrato will come in naturally as a speaking, as part of the speech. I don't believe in forcing the vibrato in. It'll come, and it's better to you want to invite the vibrato in rather than forcing it through the door. There's Wendy Law. There's gonna be yeah, good to see you, Wendy. Hey. Should I go to grad school or buy a cello? Oh my god. I don't know. That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. That's a conversation you should have with yourself. Grad school has advantages. I don't know what kind of cello you have. Buying an instrument, yeah, it's a big challenge. I think there are many. If you look smart, and especially with living makers, you might not have to shell as much money as you think for a really good cello. There's some fantastic makers around now, and I mean it's not cheap, but there's no reason to go for famous Italian maker or something like that, or very old cello. I have from Ryan, any advice how to approach or think about improvisation on cello? I try to do it on my own. I suck at it, and that's something I'm really hoping to work on. I can't really help with it much. I don't know if it already had it or if it's coming, but I know Nassim Al-Atrash did a cello bello talk. Maybe he'll be back. If he does it, he's great. Mike Block has all sort of resources you can find online. He's fantastic at it. These days there's so many people who are so good at it. So don't ask me. That's something I would love to know more and do more. If I know about virtual summer camps, festivals for intermediate, advanced high school cellists, you know what? I'll think about it. I don't know so much now. Everything's so confusing because some places are going back to in person and some places are not. We at Tanglewood we have a class. We have Tanglewood Music Center back, but we had to cut the cello class, everything. We had to cut it in half to accommodate all the new rules. So it was really heartbreaking. We had to uninvite some phenomenal cellists. So it's this summer is going to be tough. Hopefully next summer things will get closer to normal. If anyone in the chat has like a resource or some kind of list online of good virtual summer camps for advanced high school cellists, then Kate would like to know. So if I get a comment about that, I will move it on. And there's Nancy. Hey Nancy, nice to see you. And Richard. That's the thing of all this time wasted in being online, and you get to, well, it's not wasted because you get to know a lot of community of cellists from around the world, which is very, very cool. 24 Weinberg. I should have known. The preludes there are 24 of them. It makes sense because it's like the keys, even though they're not tonal and they're not in any key, but that must be like a kind of a hat, tipping his hat to Bach. Could I share with you some cello music from Mexican composers? Certainly. There's, I think, as far as we're talking repertoire, there's such a wealth of fantastic music from composers of Central and South America that more and more of them are coming to the surface here. I'm speaking coming from the U.S. I think as players, as orchestras are looking for more diverse music, especially since we have such a big Latin American community in in the United States, and so I think trying to connect with composers from that part of the world, and I'm sure there's tons of good music. How do you work on listening to and projecting the resonance of your cello? That's a good question. So coming back to the idea of practicing and finding your sound, I think that's a good thing to think about. So what I do sometimes, I think let's move this so I can see some of the cello. Here we go. We always forget that every note in the cello and every way we want to make it speak has a different contact point. We all know the ratio of contact point, speed, and pressure, and every note has something different. So I think it's always useful to pick at random. Let's say I'm picking this B, and I'm trying a few different things. Let's say I'm trying kind of a slow bow, and I'm trying to find where I want it between the bridge and the fingerboard, and try to match it with the speed. So I might want to speed it up. Also on the room you're at, and when you do that for a long time and listen really carefully for the overtones, probably through Zoom you can't really hear much, but as I change very subtle things with the playing, with the amount of pressure, with where I am, and with the speed, I start to hear all these changes in the overtones and the sound, and sometimes you will just find a resonance that you really like. So it's like, and then all of a sudden I get to a certain sound that I really enjoy. Then I might look for a matching vibrato. And the hearing has to be like everything when you play. You have to do two things at once. You have to be the player and you have to be the listener. So trying to split your brain in two and having one half be the creator, the one who plays, and the other half being an objective listener. And that's very hard to do. So being objective about what I like in the sound, and then maybe once I find something I like, change it completely, and try more movements. That's a way. That's a good way to practice finding a sound you like. And then when you after you've done that for a while, you can connect it to a piece of music that you're working on and find a spot there and find that note. So everything is particular to the music we play. There isn't any general. I think it's a misconception. We think of cello sound. So this person has a great tone, but we want to have a tone, a specific tone for a note, specific note for a note in a specific piece, and not worry too much about this is my sound, but try to use our cello to make justice to all the notes in the specific music. Thomas is asking if I can share what it was like to play with Bernard Greenhouse for Greenhouse, Starker, Lynn Harrell. Oh, that's interesting because I've had very different experiences with those three in very different times of my life. So Starker, I played for a bunch of times when I was little because I was saying my first teacher, Uri Vardi, he was a student of Starker. So when I was in Israel, Starker would come and give some classes for some master classes. And so I was, I think, 10 maybe or 9 first time I played for him, and then kept playing for him again until I was maybe 13 or 14. So I was pretty young. I still remember I played for him the Popper, what's that? Gavot number 2, that I think a lot of kids play because it's in one of the Suzuki books, and I really don't remember much about what he said. My teacher was a student of Starker, so a lot of the technical foundations of Starker's ideas were transmitted to me. I just remember him being very kind to me and just being very, very, which was good because I heard horror stories about how mean it could be. So I was happy to, maybe because I was little, because he wasn't so nice to everyone, but he was just such a charmer. And Starker's playing is the more I hear it now, the more I appreciate it. It always had that reputation of being cold and a cold technician, but I think that's very far from the truth, and especially some early recordings. Now when he's not alive, we can't see how statue-like he is when he plays. If you just listen to it, it's just beautiful, beautiful phrasing, very elegant, very gorgeous. The Lynn Harrell I worked with in shit, now I'm forgetting the festival. But Lynn, the nice thing is that a lot of his things that he was working on are now available online. He did all his master classes and those little those little TikToks he did before he passed away. And even though his playing was very eccentric, he had very, very helpful ideas for technique. And music too. I worked with him on Shlomo, and he had great insight. And the other thing is, he's one of the few, well, at least was, now there's so many of them. At the time, I thought of him as one of the few full-time soloists. So when he works with you when he worked with me on Dvorak or in Schumann, you had a very clear idea of like, okay, here you have to listen to this or that in the orchestra, or you have to match with something because it's something that he was doing daily. And Bernard Greenhouse, again, I started with his students a lot. I used to come he would come to Israel for classes, and I would come to his place in Cape Cod. In Greenhouse, there was really the feeling of you're continuing the tradition. There are always stories, and especially since he was very close to Casals, you would get a lot of ideas from Casals, fingerings and timings and all, and some fantastic stories. So there's a lot I got. I wish I remembered more specifically, and also, showing my age. I wish now, like, we had more available, like, if we could record lessons all the time. I've started with all these great players, and I wish I remembered more details of things I got from them. Oh, that's an interesting question. So Jonathan is asking, in what ways does playing professionally in a professional orchestra affect the way you play and practice individually? That's a very interesting question. I think playing in an orchestra, I think you focus on certain things. I think something like intonation is something that you have to, because in an orchestra, if you play out of tune, especially in a good section when the intonation around you is very good, it really sticks out, and you have to hold yourself to a very high standard of intonation, and so and the other thing is I think you learn to focus on specific things. You really have, because you get used to very fast, really learning things in the fast lane. Because in a professional orchestra, you have a week. Usually, the first rehearsals for us is Tuesday. The performance is Thursday. So even if it's a Mahler symphony or any new piece or whatever it is, you just have less than 2 days to get from first reading to concert, and so you learn to weed out some of the unnecessary work that I think we often do. We just play through. So the focus, the kind of focus the attention. And it's funny that I play a lot of chamber music, and I play with my colleagues in the orchestra, and then I play with people who are not in the orchestra, and I like both. When I play with players in the orchestra, usually the reading is a lot better. We finish the first rehearsal and the piece is ready to go, but then people just don't have the patience to start discussing and getting very deep into how it's played. So we get very quickly to a place where we can play it well, and everyone knows how to listen to find what to latch onto, because that's another thing you learn playing a lot in orchestra. You find what other instrument, what other voices you latch onto. But that's about it. When you play with non-orchestra players, often it's a lot messier. The process is slower, but there's a lot more thinking and talking and discussion about character in a lot more vague terms, which sometimes actually is great. Orchestra players have this reputation, which is mostly justified, saying, okay, do you want it faster, slower, louder, softer? 99% of the time that's what it is. There'll be a conductor who starts making a big lecture about something in life and the universe and the meaning of life, and what they actually want to say is play this faster or something. I don't know if that's really relevant to cello, specifically cello playing, but I think playing in orchestra just reduces your tolerance to bullshit in a way. Yeah. Playing wise, I would say intonation is something that we really listen to, and having a clearer idea of rhythm, and because you know how you're always a piece of the puzzle. Even if and then you think even when you play solo, you're still a piece of the puzzle with a piano or with orchestra, or even if I play a Bach, it's still now I'm getting metaphysical, but where the puzzle is the time. And what we do still has to fit in a certain way. It's not, you can't just slap anything on. If I can share my thoughts on Bach Suite 6 Sarabande regarding holding the baseline notes for full written values like drones, or releasing them sooner for lightness, etc. I'm very much in the camp of releasing bass notes in Bach. Even more, not just in the Sarabande, but very, very often. I'm trying to think where that would be. Well, if you look at the second half. So one of the great things about Bach is that he knows our psychology, and he knows that he uses our memory, our note memory so sometimes there could be a bass note somewhere, and then a bass note two bars or 3 bars later, and they relate to each other, and even if we're not conscious of it as an audience, we hear it. So in this case, where you were saying the 6th Sarabande, and the second half is where there's that great passage for the bass right there, because you have that descending scale. So you have that A. So you see, Bach himself, he doesn't even bother to try and stay in that octave. He goes he moves octave. It doesn't have to play the D again. We hear it. And here we move an octave from, but we hear it. It doesn't need, and then he goes to the B because we don't have a low B on the cello. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think Bach at all meant to sustain chords that bass or chord notes have to always stay long. I think that's very important in the Sarabande of the Fourth Suite. We don't really need to. We don't need to hold all of them. There's some places where actually releasing the accompanying notes frees up the melody very much. And I worked on some of those with Anders Bilsma, and he would have you let go of notes much more earlier than you'd think is reasonable. The other nice thing that I learned from Bilsma is that when you have chords, when you have a series of chords and some of them have 3 or 4 notes, and then you have double stops. The double stops are actually chords. They're chords of 2. And so if you break, I should bring my music, but in some of the sarabands you'll have series of chords that will have 3-note chord, 3-note chord, double stop, 3-note chord. So he would show how to also break the double stop as if it's a broken chord. So that way you maintains the separation of the bass of the different voices. I thought that's a very cool concept I got from him that I'm still using, because you come to think about it, that that's just our technique. Why we roll chords of 3 or 4 but play together chords of 2. So musically, actually rolling more, I think is much more. So basically, if holding like drones, we don't need that. The listener's brain does that. The listener's ear connects incredible length of time, and not just the bass. Some of the preludes. A big part of them is the high notes, how far they go, where in the topography. So if you have a you climb up, you have that dramatic jump to E. See, in one way, now from now on. The whole story becomes the top note. When are we getting back to E? And then when do we get beyond it? And if you can look at the first prelude like that, you can look at the second prelude like that, and that's a different way of seeing the overall shape, because in our ear, we heard that E, and we're craving it. We're craving that. Getting there, and then Bach will play around. You start climbing up and back down again, back down, and then when you finally, I should get the music. You look at it and you'll see when you meet the E again, and then you go higher. It's a very satisfying, fulfilling feeling because our brain makes up a lot of stuff that they don't have to. Composer doesn't have to write everything. Composer should know that too. Moti Sachs asked, could you talk about your experience in the Israel military distinguished musician program and playing in the string quartet? By the name Moti, I'm thinking maybe Moti is Israeli, either lives there or expatriate. I don't know. It was a very interesting experience. So I have some crazy stories. If bars open again, I'll take you all out to a beer at some point and tell you some crazy stories about being a cellist soldier. I had it's a program. I'm not sure how exactly. I know it's still ongoing in Israel. I'm not sure if the format is similar, but you could take an audition at the end of your senior year in high school, and the winners numbers have changed year to year, but the winners get certain privileges during the mandatory military service. One thing was I could leave the country for summer, short summer festivals. So I did Sarasota Festival, which was crazy to do, smack in the middle of a military service, and Music Corda, which doesn't exist anymore. Um, but we also, it was a very good way of learning self-reliance. We had Ida quartet, and we decided on repertoire. We would be sent to camps to do educational concerts, which was great for us. Just figuring out how to, often hostile audience. You would go to a post on the border where they were just suffered some. They had some of their comrades in arms get killed recently, and they're like, "What the hell is it? Why do I care about a string quartet?" So trying to capture their imagination, capture their attention with the music, or explaining what we do in the music, which is very important, I think, especially these days. I think performing musicians need to know to speak with their audiences. It's been, I think, in the old days it wasn't expected. Now it is, and for some of my people I've played with were just brilliant. Speaking of improvisation, one of them, Jonathan Karen, if you look him up online, is a full-time composer in Switzerland, and he would make arrangements at the last moment for anything that was asked for. And I have so many stories. That's but another thing was I think important for me doing that service is becoming less picky. I learned to not be one of those cellists who has to have a specific chair or have a specific time to warm up, because we would be sent in a little van and thrown somewhere. And it's like, okay, you have this and that piece played in 10 minutes, and there's a chair with arms, so what are you going to do? So I think we as cellists, especially with chairs and what happens with the end pin and this and that and equipment, we get very picky, and it's good to lose that a little bit, and that was good for me, because I don't feel like, even though now with the Boston Symphony I'm kind of spoiled on that, I don't feel like I need things to be a certain way. Sarah saying, can you discuss the process of developing personal sound character? Oh, that's interesting. Every great musician has a sound that is identifiable. You know exactly who is playing without seeing them, whether Daniil Shafran or Alyssa Wallerstein. How do we work on this and not become poor versions of our teachers or idols? That's a very good question. You have to acknowledge that you will be influenced by your teachers or idols. So being too artificially trying to be original, I think, in everything is counterproductive. I don't want to be vague, but follow your truth and do what sounds good to you. I don't think it's something you can plug in and just create your own sound. I think someone like Shafran, I doubt that he decided to be on that. It's just that sound that he made was how his body was and what appealed to him. And the same applies to Alyssa or to anyone. So I think you try to you play. The great thing is, again, things that are different now than when I was a kid is that you can record yourself so easily. You don't need to be a techie at all. You just put your phone in front of you. So it's very easy for you to play and find things that you like. And you'll find that you're not going to sound like your teacher, especially if you have a good teacher. Good teachers are the better the teacher, usually the more different students are from each other. I think if you just have consistency in practice and curiosity, I don't think that's being poor versions of teachers or idols really works. And it doesn't work. If you try to play like Rostropovich, you're not going to be able to, because you need to have his life story. You have to have his weird body shape, etc. So I don't think you should fear influences. Influences are good, but always have just have an ear to what you like to hear when you play. So someone's asking about Marlborough Festival, and let's just see, because we don't have much time. I think it's always needed vibrato. Uh, yeah, to have the technical ability to choose when to use it. Yeah, just going looping back to vibrato for a second. That I really think just don't worry about it consistently. So pick a passage and concentrate on that, and then worry about something else. Then get back to a different passage and focus uh, on vibrato. So make vibrato something you concentrate on in limited amounts of time, and then the rest of the time don't worry about it and get back to it, and gradually it'll if it's something that is if your vibrato is free and healthy, and if you find a vibrato you like, it will gradually just integrate itself with the playing. But I wouldn't worry about it so much. It's something that comes organically with time. So make time every day to make that the focus on of your practice, and then let it go. Just completely let it go. And I think with time it'll work. Um, so about Marlborough, that's something I did for 2 summers right before I joined the orchestra. It's a wonderful festival. Um, what did I? How did it shape my musical development? Well, I think with Marlborough, it's true with every festival, but Marlborough in particular, is that you get to know people. That's why I'll encourage my students to go to summer camps and festivals. You get to know people, and in the case of Marlborough, you get to know people, and you just know that a bunch of them are going to do really great within a few years. So luckily, I got my orchestra job, so I didn't need so much networking. Um, but that's one thing that's really important. You get to know good players. You play chamber music with them, and you learn from them from one another. And at Marlborough, you play with the senior teacher. Well, they're not teachers. There's no faculty. They're well, basically they're faculty. It's a big, but um, by name they're not faculty. But you play with great artists, and just getting a lot of that kind of experience. Another thing at Marlborough that's wonderful is that there's no set time for performance, as opposed to most places where you're preparing for a specific performance. At Marlborough, you start a piece and you may perform it or you may not, and that takes off the pressure. So you can really get very deep on any piece of music. I did the Schoenberg string trio, and we just went on for weeks and weeks. We performed after 7 weeks of rehearsal, and I've never had such a experience of playing a 12-tone piece where you know where everything goes, and you can actually hear the 12-tone row as if it's a scale. You can hear when it's right or when it's wrong. So getting to know a piece so intimately, it's something that in real life situation you never get to, because you have the performance, you have to get it ready. How's your perspective as a musician and artist changed throughout your career? Well, that's a big question. Yeah, that's a big question. It's changed. Okay, I'll have to think about it. But I think we're out of time. So thanks for tuning in. And if I have closing thoughts, I don't really have closing thoughts. It's so wonderful to have this community of cellists, and between Cello Bello and all the other resources that are online now. That's one thing I think for a lot of us, for me for sure. During this pandemic, just knowing that we're one giant community of cellists, and be it students or professionals or amateurs, and these days the it's not even as clearly delineated as it once was. So especially with things that are happening online, if you're, it doesn't really matter if you're um, a student, or a student can be somewhat of a professional, and an amateur or is a student, and etc. So all I can say is I just hope that even when concerts come back, that we have that community, that we stand for each other, that we support each other, and I wish for all of you to have audience soon. We're, at the BSO, we're starting Tanglewood in July, and we'll have audience, reduced capacity, but we'll have audience. And oh my God! So can't wait for that, and to see what happens with the music world and with everything. Hope for the best. All right, it's been a pleasure.